Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Cathedral. The Sunshine Cathedral is a different kind of church where the past is past and the future has infinite possibilities. And with that, we invite you to come and worship with us here on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. Now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
Our first reading today is from 1 Corinthians. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. In these human words, God's voice is heard. Our second reading is from the wisdom of Abraham Heschel. The beginning of faith is not a feeling for the mystery of living or a sense of awe, wonder, and amazement. The root of religion is the question what to do with the feeling for the mystery of living, what to do with awe, wonder, and amazement. Religion begins with a consciousness that something is asked of us. It is in that tense, eternal asking in which the soul is caught and in which humanity's answer is elicited. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
God is with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you in Lord Christ.
Then Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of God is upon me, who has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. God has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of divine favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." This is the gospel, the good news.
It would be many years before I realized that all human beings have to come out about something or another. And all of us at some point will have to reveal something that is our truth, but that is contrary to the desires and expectations of family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors. And that something can be more or less momentous or life-changing. And having come into the moment when our truth has to be revealed, what will become of us gets set in motion, carrying us to places and possibilities that we could not imagine. It is revelatory and empowering, if not uncomfortable or unsafe or advisable. And I suspect that the reason that people do not want us to come out about one thing or another is that to do so, to claim a thing, is to have it fulfilled in their hearing. And there are many people who would rather live in the dark than embrace the truth of life in the light. Several years ago, I would see firsthand how true that actually is. I also discovered that coming out experience is actually a universal experience. There will come a time when we must disclose something about ourselves which offers the world the truest picture of who we are and what we are all about. I saw it in the experience of a husband and wife team, Pastors Dennis and Christine Wiley of Covenant Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. Affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention, Covenant Baptist Church is a neighborhood institution in an economically depressed majority African American southeast quadrant of Washington, D.C. In its ministry to those on the margins, it has become a prophetic presence in a barren land, known for its good works. But the community and many of its members had no idea just how prophetic Covenant Baptist Church would be. As part of the mundane church task of strategic planning, the pastors Wiley took their congregation on a journey of radical inclusion that is often easy to proclaim rhetorically and nearly impossible to do in practice, especially when the world is watching. They would lead their congregation to adopt a vision statement that they recite every Sunday morning. All are welcome, regardless of race, ethnicity, class, gender, age, or sexual orientation. Now, many a church and many a pastor can claim this without ever having to deliver on it. But not the pastors of Covenant Baptist Church. When one of their own, a young gay man, asked for their support for his ordination and to publicly consecrate his relationship with his partner, the pastors would have to tell the world who they really were and what they were all about. They would have to let their members know, their neighbors know, and their colleagues know who and what they were all about. They would have to let the Southern Baptist Convention know who they were and what they were all about. They would have to let them know that they truly believed in the full inclusion of LGBT persons in their church, and they were prepared to act on that belief. The pastors went before their congregation and told them that they had intended to honor the request of the young man. In agreeing to ordain that young man and consecrate his relationship, the church's vision statement that all are welcome regardless of race, ethnicity, class, gender, age, or sexual orientation was fulfilled in the congregation's hearing. The pastors Wiley and Covenant Baptist Church would never be the same. And without going into too much detail about the backlash they experienced and a lawsuit targeting them, you can conclude how they have fared when I tell you that Covenant Baptist Church is now known as Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ. In religious life, there is nothing more risky than coming out as one in solidarity with those who exist and subsist on the margins of society. There is nothing more scandalous than concerning oneself with the concerns and interests of those that society deems unclean or untouchable or unacceptable in some way. Jesus of Nazareth, Mary and Joseph's boy, would discover just how risky. On this third Sunday of Epiphany, in the lectionary readings for today, God's revelation in the life and ministry of Jesus gets clearer. And we are fortunate to have a reading from the Gospel of Luke, which shows how Jesus will go about revealing who he is and what he is all about. It is perhaps an experience that we all may be a little familiar with. And prior to this moment, Jesus had a transformative experience through the sacrament of baptism in his encounter with John the Baptizer. Finding within it the confirmation of his connection with God. Then Jesus undergoes temptation in the wilderness. The scholar said it was the Dead Sea Desert, a barren land. And there he has to confront the demons that plague all human beings who feel called to service and discipleship. He has to confront idolatry and self-centeredness and self-aggrandizement. And he comes through it more confident in his identity and empowered for ministry. Now he has to go home. He has to go back to the place where he is known. He has to go back to family and friends and neighbors and to let them know who he really was. He has to pick the right moment, the right place and time to reveal his true nature and purpose. Sounds like many a Thanksgiving day. And so Jesus takes the opportunity that comes with what he customarily does when he goes home to mama and daddy. He attends the synagogue in Nazareth. And this would be how he would make known to everyone who he was and what he was all about. This would be Jesus' opportunity to come out as someone with a different goal in mind. Someone with a different mission than what was expected. He was invited to read the scripture. And in the synagogue, he takes the scroll, he unrolls it, and reads a text chosen from Isaiah. It just happens to be the passage from Isaiah that includes a prophecy of deliverance for Israel. God's plan of restoration for God's people from their persecution. As he reads it with such authority and knowingness, the words become his personal testimony, a recounting of his experience of baptism and testing in the wilderness, what he's learned through that experience, which leads inexorably here at the synagogue. And he reads, "The Spirit of our God is upon me, because God has anointed me to bring good news to those who are poor. God has sent me to proclaim liberty to those held captive, recovery of sight to those who are blind, and release to those in prison, to proclaim the year of our God's favor." He rolled up the scroll and he sat down. But there was something different in the way that Jesus read this familiar text. The people sensed that something had happened. The words seemed much weightier coming from him. It was as if they gleaned that the words were somehow more meaningful, more urgent than when read and heard before. And the evangelist of Luke reports that their eyes were fixed on him, possibly in anticipation of what he would say when he began teaching. And then Jesus said to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Today. It all begins today. Now you know who I am and what I am all about. Now it begins today. Now we get to work ushering in the reign of God, not just for our people, but for all people. It all begins today. You see, Jesus would take the prophecy from Isaiah about Israel's liberation from persecution to proclaim a universal liberation of all people, regardless of their heritage, regardless of their geographic location. In Luke's hands, Jesus would use his authority to interpret the prophetic text in a broader way. Oh, Jesus does not make a direct quote of the Isaiah passage. Rather, he chooses the words carefully, taking the opportunity to read the passage in such a way that the listeners will hear it anew. And in it, they will see that there is a broader mission for us. There's a broader understanding of what it means to serve. Service and discipleship will now mean bringing a message of hope and deliverance to all people, especially those who have been left out of such prophecies before. Oh, those gathered at the synagogue that day would have heard the Isaiah passage many times and would have recognized in it that they heard from rabbis certain things about themselves in that passage. But they would be both impressed and surprised to see Mary and Joseph's boy speaking so eloquently. But they'd also be kind of confused to hear him proclaim that not only that it all begins today, but everyone is included. Oh, like the prophets before him. And in claiming that the scripture had now been fulfilled, Jesus makes clear to those assembled that all the yesterdays have not been used to great effect. The poor, the sick, the oppressed, and the captives have not been restored. The status quo of persecution and domination of those on the margins continue apace, and we have not